Hello, it is Saturday, November the 12th, 2022. My name is Jay Carpenter. I'm founder of Desert Blockchain and Desert Blockchain Camps. We're at Desert Blockchain Camp, 27th Avenue in Georgia, in Phoenix, Arizona. And this is our open house session for the month. Every second Saturday of the month, we have an open house session. And mute this. And basically, the way it works, if you're not familiar with Desert Blockchain and Desert Blockchain Camps, is we have about an hour of conversation, presentation, and so forth on various topics around decentralized web, decentralization, Web3, DWeb, various dimensions, and things that are happening in the cryptocurrency area. And then we break for lunch, and we'll have free pizza here for the folks attending, and that'll last for about an hour or so. But you're welcome to join us on the Zoom, or excuse me, on YouTube live stream, and which is recorded, and put your questions in the chat. If you are a Desert Blockchain citizen, which is $10 per month on Patreon, then you can join us via Zoom. That's one of the citizen benefits. So we've got some folks that have gathered today, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on viable decentralized identity. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Any questions or comments before we get started? Hey, Randy. So let's.
I like this topic very much.
Okay, Shah likes the topic a lot.
Yes.
And I think it's very, very timely. Before I get into screen share, let me tell you a little bit about my background in the decentralized identity area and identity in general. So I spent a number of years in the telecommunications realm, and from basically the early 2000s till about 2014, I was very much involved with how do we introduce identity and market-based solutions to identity in the telecommunications realm. And there was an initiative called electronic number mapping, or ENUM, that started in, I think, about 1999, and was an initiative for the telecoms to introduce a lot of functionality that would be great today associated with telephone numbering and telephone number-like addresses. And it is actually part of ENUM, which is RFC 6116 with the Internet Engineering Task Force. You can look it up. It is a key part of our telecommunications infrastructure for sending SMS messaging and photos and things like that in the background, but it never materialized the way it was intended to do, which was to create this harmony around our addressing and basically give us control over all of our disparate addresses and so forth. So that, although it wasn't directly couched as identity, it involved a lot of elements of identity that are missing in the whole ecosystem, the digital ecosystem right now. So I'm going to go through a presentation, and this is just kind of a run through, and I'm hoping to get feedback from the folks that are here and anybody that's, you know, watches the recording and so forth. But the topic, the volume of the topic that started in the late 90s and kind of increased in the telecom realm. And then I discovered blockchain in 2014. I said, here is the solution. Anyway, the volume around this conversation is increasing rapidly. And most recently, Mr. Musk's purchase of Twitter, I think he is discovering how elusive identity is, or at least decentralized, what's approaching decentralized identity, which is a lot different than centralized identity, which he was used to at PayPal. But Mr. Musk, and from what I'm reading in the news, is running up against some issues around identity in Twitter, not the least of which was Twitter Blue that, was charging $8 per month. And apparently they had to shut that down because there was a lot of people signing up for that and then posing as companies and brands and tweeting things that were misleading, if not fraudulent. So so that's kind of that sort of sets the stage here. I'll ask anybody have any comments about that basic premise about decentralized identity and so forth? Yeah.
A little bit. I'm sure you guys heard about the FTX thing.
Yeah.
So I know it's slightly different, but it kind of plays into that whole like not your keys, not your crypto, the idea, and just that decentralization, and that's a whole kind of complicated conversation. But just tapping into that maybe too in our conversation.
Yeah.
Where it's applicable.
Yeah, we can talk about that because, and I don't know exactly what happened with FTX, but it's certainly a huge.
Worse than Voyager. Luckily, I was not part of this one.
Yeah.
I did not get involved with FTX, but I have been following it because FTX was supposed to buy out Voyager, which I'm part of that lawsuit. So I've been getting updates of them, and they actually had written up the contract, and we got a vote on it as people that own coins. And that was like a couple weeks ago. So finding out this is happening when they were supposed to buy Voyager, it's now just going to create a huge trickle down effect in all these different exchanges or people that were involved in it. So there is a lot more to unfold as this comes out, like financially in the decentralized market, because a lot of people were involved in this.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, there's multiple problems going on here, but being able to identify who was part of FTX and what their interests were and their claims and all that stuff is going to be real.
Like, way back. You also had like a day, well, some of that attack on Ethereum have like a contract. But that was like, why on board.
Wasn't that what that Roman gaming place? Or is it before that?
Well,
Don't put me on it, right?
yeah.
But
So we're talking about FTX, the collapse of that, and we're talking about some items in Ethereum. And by the way, if you take a look at the tweets for Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, you'll see that he is, or from what I've seen, he is saying that decentralized identity is going to be one of the key next steps for the Ethereum ecosystem. And he's very much interested in that with his soulbound tokens paper and so forth. So let me what I'm going to do is connect my keyboard and we'll go into the presentation. And okay, so I'm going to start the screen share. And is there anybody that would be willing to go get the pizza? I asked Shaw, but I know you're interested in this conversation.
How far is Barrows?
It's Barrows. It's 35th Avenue. and
Oh.
Bethany.
Rod, do you mind picking up the pizza at lunchtime? Okay,
Yeah, it's ready anytime. So, yeah, that'd be great. It's 35th Avenue and Bethany.
Okay.
In the yeah, Barrows. You know where that's at?
Sure. Bethany.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's all paid for. Kevin took the order. It's under my name and my phone number.
Okay.
So can
Patty, can you text me
you text
Jay's number?
my number? Okay.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So this, again, this is just kind of a rough draft, a beginning draft. I'm going to be talking with some folks on Monday that have attended the DWeb Camp 2022 and are very interested in decentralized identity. But let's take a look at some of the topics. And let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about definitions. What do I mean by viable? What I mean by decentralized identity? Some other things that are involved in the next slide. And, you know, the question I would pose to everybody is, you know, why is this so elusive? There are some of the major companies in the world are trying to solve this issue. And they've been trying to solve it for a long, long time, like 5 years or more. And you know, there's an initiative called ION. There is an initiative called Evernym, Sovereign. They've spent 5 years crafting something called decentralized identifiers. They've written what they hope would be a specification with the W3C, which was sort of backed off from a specification to a recommendation in July of this year. So why is this so elusive? Why is it that you've got some of the smartest people in the world and the smartest people in computer science have not been able to figure this out? And you know, that's my opinion. They haven't been able to figure it out. They might disagree. And this is part of the reason that I've couched this as viable decentralized identity. And what do I mean by viable? I mean that can this approach to workable or viable decentralized identity actually be implemented to fulfill what the intentions are, which is basically to give us control of our identities? And can it be adopted? So we have someone joining us. So, you know, can it be adopted? Can it scale? Can we use it? That's what I mean by viability. And if you look up the definition of viability, it means successful. And what are some of the dimensions? And I'll go over some of those in the next slide. And what's been tried in the past. And what I talked about with the electronic number mapping, that there was a ton of work that was done for years around enum, is what it's called, RFC 6116. that basically was shut down. And, you know, that's one of the initiatives that I point to as something that did not fulfill what was at least the intentions that were set out with something called end user opt-in enum at the beginning, which was again designed so that we could control our own digital resources, digital addressing, our identity, and so forth. And by the way, that, let's say, inability to determine who is the caller is showing up now in the initiatives to try to stem the tide of robocalls. And that's called shaken and stirred. And there's been a ton of work around that. And, you know, you got to ask yourself, is that the shaken and stirred attempt to stem robocalling, has that been a viable implementation? I don't know if it's you, but I get a ton of robocalls daily. So, and not only that, but I've also had calls that I actually wanted and needed that were blocked because of the shaken and stirred initiative. So, you know, other attempts, Microsoft launched and tried to implement something called Passport that was basically a failure. And there have been other attempts at identity and so forth. And I assert that, you know, the purchase of LinkedIn, the purchase of GitHub, the purchase of various social media constructs at very, very high prices looks to me like an attempt to catch up in the identity space. And certainly Mr. Musk's purchase of Twitter, in my view, had identity components to it. And if you look at a recent interview with him with Barron Funds, Ron Barron, it's about an hour-long interview. I watched it last night. He specifically states that part of the reason he's charging the $8 per month is to validate and verify identity.
So what's this?
It's an interview that you can find with Elon Musk and Barron, B-A-R-O-N.
That's nice.
It's about 4 days old, but
But I can find it on.
I'll probably add it to the presentation. So anyway, and let me do a sound check here.
Do you think Elon Musk is kind of creating or like opening the doors to that narrative that like identity is going to be tied to money and now like digital asset, right? Because he's always been a big crypto supporter and he's very thoughtful in what he does. I think manipulative, but also savvy. Look what he did with like Dogecoin, and he used Twitter to like manipulate that like last year or whatever. I think because obviously this $8 thing is failing theoretically because people are making fake accounts about insulin and whatever and affecting the stock market. But I think he's trying to pave the way for this next step, which is digital, like you talked about digital identity.
So I'm gonna go off screen share for just a minute to address this. And
I mean, do you think it's on purpose? Like he knows that the whole $8 thing is going to fail?
I don't think he knows that. I think that was an earnest attempt at a new revenue model, but more importantly, hey, Willie, more importantly, a way to validate or authenticate identity. I think it's smart, but yeah, go ahead. Let me do a sound check. Tom, can you hear us? I think it's Tom.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Did you try to get in on another line?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It wouldn't let me, so.
Okay, if you could shut that down, that'd be great. So, and can you hear us okay, Tom?
Yes, I'm actually dialed in, so that's me.
Yeah, I figured that was you, but it looks like your connection that you tried to go in on Zoom is having trouble. So if you could terminate that attempted connection, that would be great. And then just be with us via the phone line. So in this interview with Elon Musk, that was about 4 days ago with Barron Funds, he's actually saying that his purchase of Twitter might be his most valuable asset. And I'm pretty sure he said that it might be like it might be a $1 trillion asset. And yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Well, I want to respond to a couple of comments. I'm not going to deny that he hasn't had to readjust for the thing that I think the reason that he created the Twitter Blue concept with the $8 charge primarily was to eliminate bots. That's the first thing he talked about months ago. That there are too many fake accounts that are overloading the Twitter feed. Now, I don't think he realized that people are nefarious and they'll take advantage of anything that they can.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of backfired in a small sense. The secondary point that he also made previously, which again, I'm not denying that he said something 4 days ago, but in the past, he also said he wants to create value and monetize creators' ability to provide benefit on the platform.
Right.
He specifically said that. So I think the first two reasons were to get rid of bots and create monetization, not only for his own purpose because he lost advertisers, because some people were unwilling to accept the concept that there's so much policing and squelching of what I would just call general free speech. There was definitely some ill-gotten speech, no question about that, and that needs to be addressed. But I think that the previous owners of Twitter, not even Jack Dorsey's original vision, had created such a bottleneck, and I think that's one of the reasons why he wanted to create an opportunity for revenue that creators could start, and that would give value to that blue check mark and solve his revenue model, because he's lost quite a few advertisers in the last several months and big names, names that we all know very well because we use their products a lot. So I think those are the first two things. And one of them was in response to Tricia, that I think that he really wants to give some monetary benefit to creators that are providing content that's worth the value. And I would agree with you, even though the Tesla got him the fame, this is his most valuable. I mean, literally, the government doesn't want him to own this because they think this is a threat because, and this is going to be a political statement, but in my opinion, the mainstream media has helped control Twitter and has created a lot of controversy in how news and information is being distributed. And he took it on directly and he even said, I want to counter what I see as a misrepresentation of free speech. I mean, literally, I mean, figuratively, that's probably a quote, you know, not a specific quote, but he literally wanted to give back free speech to anybody who's on Twitter. And
Mhm.
there's gonna be problems like you're suggesting, because people are nefarious and want to take advantage of the situation. That's how I see most of this.
Well, let's highlight a couple other points, because in this interview with Ron Barron, and in other media pieces, the goal, one of his goals, or one of the goals of Twitter and potential of Twitter, is to have like an all-encompassing app that,
Absolutely.
That
He's
is-
already stated
yeah,
he wants to add some kind of transaction ability with the whole system. Yes,
Right.
Similar to what Facebook wanted to do
right.
4 years ago and got slapped.
And
Not everyone owns Twitter though, like, I don't know, could just be me, but I feel like any payment processing segment on Twitter is gonna fail because people don't have it. And also, like, we have, like, a term of free speech, like, one of the most popular, like, federated networks is ActivityPub. And so we've already had pretty good free speech platforms for people who, you know, can work interchangeably. With technically Twitter phone, so.
well, so there's definitely multiple dimensions to this entire conversation. And, you know, one of the sort of competitors that's mentioned is WeChat in China and so forth. And WeChat is approaching like this all-encompassing app and so forth. And I believe the Chinese government has taken interest in WeChat and so forth.
Having had three Chinese foreign exchange students, they're deeply involved with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question.
So WeChat, and then historically, if you look at what the impact of Twitter was in the Arab Spring in 2010, I mean, Twitter had a major impact in the what occurred with the downfall of the leadership in the Arab world in, you know, I think it was 2010 or whatever. So there's multiple dimensions to this. Elon Musk also in this interview says that he created a business plan in like 2000 before PayPal with his X.com, which was purchased by PayPal or whatever. And he said that's never been implemented, and he's planning to implement that 22-year-old business plan. So all that being said, when you start to look at some of the possibilities and some of the elements associated with Twitter, I also assert that Twitter is one of the primary identity authentication platforms. You can use Twitter to sign into various accounts and so forth. And that's, you know, really powerful, just like you can use Facebook and Google and so forth. So all that being said, and we're kind of jumping around from dimension to dimension on this, but here's something else that I assert is really, really needed, particularly by Mr. Musk. In my view, there needs to be, I call it a Christmas tree. There needs to be a structure, a source of truth, a directory, if you will, that various entities can attach to and have a high degree of assurance that who they're connecting with is who they want to connect with. So in other words, a
Social score?
not a social score, but more like, I'll call it like a telephone book for the entire world. But it's decentralized. If such a structure existed, I assert that that would be a key component to ushering in the vision for autonomous vehicles and autonomous drones and so forth. The reason being is I think all these devices need to act as a whole network together. So all the cars need to be, whether they're GM, Ford, Toyota, Tesla, whatever, they need to be talking to one another and sensing what each one of them senses and communicating in order to have effective autonomous driving and so forth. Without that, I think it is, and I don't think it's possible to accomplish what they, purportedly are out to create with autonomous vehicles. Now, Waymo supposedly is about to launch.
No, they have.
They have.
In fact, just 20 minutes ago, I was next to a car at a light, a Waymo car, and I took a picture. There was no driver in that car.
It's not even like they used to do like the C costume or something. They don't even do that anymore. So
Okay.
they're pretty.
But-
bad.
There's nobody driving this car. And this
Okay.
thing-
But I think this specific current instance is a localized thing. You're talking about much closer.
Yeah,
And
it's localized.
I think we are on the same page with what you're saying. It's just, it is existing in localized, small areas. To
Well,
be a global network plan and multiple facets.
I totally agree with Jay. So, if on the street, they're all automated, then no one to drive, just driven by, IT or the AI, whatever. If there is they should, the cars, all the vehicles, they should communicate to each other, and then there should be a very powerful computer system to deal with this later, to avoid, accident or whatever. So if, that would be a bigger challenge.
yeah.
But you're talking about a platform. They have to have a standardized platform for interoperability communication.
All I'm saying is, and this is not a new idea. Yes, there has to be
That's what the metaverse is trying to create, I think.
part of what the metaverse is trying to create. We'll see what happens with this Waymo
Yeah.
as they continue to run it, because Uber, after one accident, that pretty much canned their program.
Yeah.
Here in.
Common AI is the currently like open source self-driving software. And so like if you want to, like they support like hundreds of vehicles where you can like implement. Now it's not fully self-driving. I believe currently they officially support where you'll like keep you in a lane, will turn and do stop at stop lights and stop signs. So it's got there. But I think all that does is it just looks at what you would see with drivers. So it like it has cameras and all the regular spots you would do. It doesn't do anything super fancy. And I think that's the key thing is because like we're always gonna have like car clubs. So there's gonna be someone out there with a really nice car who wants to drive it themselves or who knows when. But also like I think like if you look at like just local communications, like we can pretty much create like a Bluetooth network. If you get one strong enough or something like that, I think that's gonna be a lot more beneficial. Like tell the car next to you, I am turning, and even if they can't see you on their cameras, they know you are turning. And then but it's also like, it's really interesting because if Waymo has no self-driving cars, like the key issue is like when there's no weather, when weather's bad, they just not.
That's why they tested in
driving the
Phoenix,
cars.
because it has more
Yeah.
stable weather. They have not tested in snow or
That's
high
good.
altitude,
That's
hilly areas.
So they just like this Waymo just offline when it rains.
It might
Well,
be better.
there's a whole bunch of, they would classify them as corner cases, but we'll see just how corner those cases are. But when there's construction, when there's an accident, all these things, we'll see how that turns out. There was just an article in Bloomberg saying that the autonomous vehicle initiatives have basically gone through $100 billion and it still doesn't work. Now, I get that Waymo has cars on the street as we speak. They're driving autonomously. And in this interview, Mr. Musk says that Tesla is way ahead of anybody else in the autonomous vehicle realm. All that being said, in my view, and Arizona State University apparently has some mock-ups of this. I think what's really needed is for these different devices to be talking with one another and coordinating with one another to at least augment whatever's going on with artificial intelligence.
We can have like Waymo, not Waymo, sorry, to interrupt you.
Awesome.
Really, because like Waze used to do that. It would like kind of check like how many drivers are near you, like report accidents and stuff like that. So like that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
because the car probably is looking at probably get it out of GPS, and if it's anything like blind license, it's probably going to keep just be like here's Google Maps or Waze, and then you have to keep track of this Waze driver next to me is turning, so I need to make sure they turn for that.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
I just have to keep track of what people are not going to drive the old cars or something.
And by the way, there's pizza over there if anybody wants to grab some. So,
I would like to kind of speak to your major premise. You said 3 words, viable, decentralized, identity. I don't think the word viable or the word identity are the problem or the challenge. It's decentralized. In a local environment, Bluetooth, like, the internet or TV white space, whatever, you can create communication between devices. That's not the problem. It's who owns it. How do you share information to verify and validate? Identity isn't the problem. You can create a packet of metadata that proves who you are. It's our license in physical form. It's our metadata in that digital form. It's how do you create, like you were saying, we need these connectivities and the networks talking to each other. How do you do that in a decentralized form? Because there's no incentive with the dollar, because you're going to cost a lot of money. You even mentioned dollars. If it's a centralized force, you can get it done because you can ram it down people's throats. But we don't want that. We want it decentralized. That's the challenge.
that is the challenge.
Yes.
I think that we talk about identity, decentralized identity. So we cannot just avoid, we should just ignore the context in a decentralized world. There's, I think, in the decentralized world, so the infrastructure of that, what does that look like? So how to mapping the identity in a decentralized world. Then we have, the real identity, actual identity, in real world, physical, right? We also, a virtual identity in the web, in that world. So I think, I think that's the top one. What the Web3 could look like.
Yeah.
So what we could use with this decentralized identity.
Well,
in that Web3.
So you mentioned a couple things. I'm going to go back to the screen share because that comes up in the presentation draft that I have.
I still don't see identity as the main.
I think the
Well-
main thing is who's gonna be the authority over
Yeah,
this.
decentralization, that's the whole point.
But I'm saying, this MTX thing kind of is a great example. Humans are capable of like, just to be like, use general terms like sin, corruption, greed, whatever. So who gets to be the digital god of our decentralized universe, right? Because somebody has to manage it. And how are we going to keep them from
Well, what
corrupting?
Jay's premise is that someone doesn't manage.
I'm saying, whether
Networks
it's-
that are autonomous on their own agree to some standards and figure out how to make it work as a distributed network. That's the key.
Yes, the point is what about the protocol? So if there is control, there is, it's central, it doesn't make any sense. So we just talk about, the identity is the core, element in a decentralized world. So that's it. No one, I agree, no one control. But we need some kind of protocol or to write it.
But the protocol will end up being whatever the physical, functional networks come to an agreement on, and hopefully it's a free market to decide that. That's the key.
Yes,
I think a good example
Whatever's
is,
gonna work will be what works.
I think a good example is Ethereum. It's decentralized, but they have a, you know,
I disagree
consortium.
with you 100%.
Well,
It's not
but you got
decentralized.
people, well,
It's not decentralized. That's a part.
it is, it isn't. There's parts of.
You
there
can do
is
classic,
parts of
prove
not.
that,
no, I think those,
But-
you,
with big
It
quotes.
was
two,
passed.
I think
Well,
you
let's,
you need to wait.
I'm gonna interrupt the conversation. It's a great conversation. I'm glad to see everybody's energized around this this
Well,
topic.
this is the most important concept for the next
I-
50 years.
I think, well, thanks for saying that, because
Yeah.
I think that is clearly coming to the surface, that this is the essence of,
Identity is the low hanging fruit. How you make that happen decentralized is the question.
yeah, and the Chief Information Security Officer, I think is his title, Les, I can't remember his last name, of Maricopa County, said that in the cybersecurity realm, the perimeter is no longer the subject of cybersecurity, it's identity.
Yeah.
So identity has taken the place of perimeter for the objective of cybersecurity. So let me run through this presentation, this great conversation, but I'll share with you a few things. So what's been tried in the past? Okay, there we go. What's been tried in the past? And you know, we definitely covered the next bullet point. Why does viable decentralized identity matter? And it's already been articulated that this is the essence of, this is the stopping point for the progression and adoption of Web3, Web5, whatever.
You know where that might be standardized? In the government's creation of their central bank digital security, digital currency, because they're gonna have to address that and create some sort of standard that they will adopt and move out into the world. There's probably a lot of mimicking of that.
Well, yeah, maybe, we'll see. But who's pursuing viable decentralized identity? We've already talked about some of that. And I can't even see. Let's see if I can move this. Yeah, and then next steps. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. So here's, if you look at the spectrum, and there are multiple spectrums associated with this realm. There's centralized versus decentralized. There's attestation versus contest, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And there's attestation versus curative, which is not curated, different than curated. Curative is a legal term on curing title. If there's a defect in title or whatever, then skin in the game versus no skin in the game. And that's one of the missing pieces of the web and why we've been plagued by spam for, you know, years and years. Bounded versus unbounded, time blocks versus perpetual. Adverse possession model doesn't really fit in the spectrum, at least, but there's a concept in real estate that if you've occupied a piece of land for a certain period of time without somebody telling you, hey, I own this and get off, then it actually becomes yours.
You have to pay the taxes too.
Okay, and you got to pay the taxes. Human friendly versus machine friendly. This is a huge missing in the initiatives around decentralized identifiers. Then new versus in use. I'm not going to go into that just yet. trust versus distrust, tenure certain versus tenure uncertain. So what that means is, all of us have set up Slack accounts and with our identifiers and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden somebody comes along and buys Slack and now we don't use it. We're not sure if we can maintain our identifiers within Slack, so on and so forth. That's what tenure certain versus tenure uncertain means. Meaning versus generic, memorable versus cryptic, branded versus generic, and market allocated versus first come, first serve. And that was certainly a key piece in the telecom realm, where telephone numbers up until 2019 in North America legally could not be bought or sold. And you could go in and ask for any telephone number, regardless of what it might spell, or if it was a repeating number, regardless of what the value might be in the marketplace. Everybody was entitled to have a shot at getting that telephone number. And that's still the case for, almost every number in North America today. And I spent like 6 years at the FCC level to advocate for a market-based allocation method, which finally happened in December of 2019. So I'm proposing to take some of these dimensions and create like a viability scale from 1 to 10 and start to measure some of the initiatives that are out there. And anyway, that's me. That's, pardon me?
It's a nice photo.
So that's basically it for my presentation for decentralized identity. And I'm going to be presenting this Monday afternoon to a group of very knowledgeable, sophisticated global developers. And this is just kind of the first step. And I have done decentralized identity presentations before, but there's a whole bunch that's happened since then and transpired. And I've also had some new outlooks and worldviews emerge in this realm that I think are worth discussing among the community. So yeah, Patricia.
Do you mind sharing just a couple points, like key points of like how you used to think, like you just said you had revelations, like kind of what you thought before and what you think like now, like some examples? I'm just curious, like what you were thinking before, how it's changed.
So the biggest thing that's coming up for me is that term curative. And what that means is, what if we took the approach that everybody's identity is imperfect, and that we need a process to perfect our identity in certain contexts and in certain directories. And I've also,
For the plastic surgeons, right?
the plastic surgeons, exactly. But what I realized was that both attestation as well as curative assumes that there's an identity that's out there already, that all that needs to be done is Patricia has to attest to Jay's identity, and Jay attests to Patricia's identity, and voila, we've got a certified identity, and life is good. But what if we assume that everybody's identity is yet to be put into existence in some sort of context, be it global or be it Desert Blockchain Camp or whatever. And once we put something into existence, like your email address or your telephone number, or maybe a combination of those, now we face a process of not attestation can still be part of it. I vouch for you, you vouch for me, but it's still open to dispute and to be perfected, just like a piece of land is open to dispute and challenge over time from anybody and everybody. So that does that kind of communicate?
Oh, yeah, but mainly I was just curious, like evolutions you've had,
Yeah.
through this, what you mentioned, you've come to realization of things. So I was just curious what those things are.
So that's one is, attestation versus curative is one
So
dimension.
you're saying before you never really thought much, or you didn't realize the procedure of it or the importance of it?
Well, the default view that most people have when you start to talk about identity is that it's already there. Everybody always says, well, all you got to do is do an iris scan or a fingerprint or whatever. And that misses, that assumes that your iris scan or your fingerprints or combination of the two are already in some sort of registry or directory that everybody would agree upon. And that's not the case. There is no, there are directories, let's say, or registries, our social security numbers that are in existence, but they are under the purview and the creation of XYZ government. And we don't have, to my knowledge, much of any control over, what that directory is, what that registry is, if we wanted to change to a different social security number, how could we do that? Maybe it's possible, I don't know. But
Can I say something?
yeah,
Well, you can create a biometric registry.
Let me say something.
You could be doing it.
you can do that, but there's still a whole dispute resolution process around that. And yeah, go ahead.
Here now, how many people? Like 6, 7, 8. We have 8 people here.
Mhm.
So we all have our own identity here. Your identity here is this here now, just now, here, and come J, really, yeah, official. Right up.
Rod, Isabel,
Yeah. And
Niles, and Raymond.
yeah,
Niles,
and Randy, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we can recognize each other here using, a face or name. So your social security system, your social security number is your identity. So we have, in different background ecosystem, we have different identity. But what the point is, in the future, in a decentralized, Web3 or whatever. So what kind of identity will you use? I think you need, when you talk about it, you need to put it in a specific environment.
Well, it's called context.
Yeah.
So
Whatever.
each one of us has arguably different identities within different contexts. Within our family, within our professional life, within, let's say, our church, our,
Yes.
if we're involved in sports organizations and technical organizations, whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's-
like email or just the phone number, your phone number, somebody, you're like, whatever, call you, the government, and call you something with your identity.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, and we
yeah.
have a phone number for work, we have a phone number for a cell phone, we might have a phone number for our home.
Yeah.
We've got all these different contexts. And, how do we get all these different contexts? How do we get some sort of harmonization among them?
A QR code tattooed on your arm.
Nice.
But then also
How about my
access.
forehead?
But also like public access, because like you said, identity is limited to the government. Like we have a fingerprint registry. If I, like that Tinder date guy that scammed all those women, he pretended to be this elaborate person and he created all of these social identity constructs to verify that he was some diamond dealer. And then it was fake and they got scammed out of all these other money and whatever. But it's like, I can't just get your fingerprint and know exactly who you are. I think they have control of that identity, that registry. And kind of what I'm hearing, which is part of our other conversations with everything else, is we need to have control over identity, but also it needs to be like a public accessible thing. It can't just be this like centralized control, like the government only has access and you need to like work in the government. And only if you're a field forensics person, you actually can access their computers and whatever. Like how do we all prove out like perfecting identity? Yeah, we understand each other here. We could not be who we say we are. You know what I mean? Theoretically, I could pretend to be a different person, but like perfecting more of like, how do we prove our identity in more ways too?
The reason that decentralized is not going to work is because I can tell you that's Randy right there. That's not the Randy you're looking for. And so we need to have some form of centralized system to make it work. Like, and the reason I say that's like, for instance, I don't know if you ever use BISC to buy Bitcoin or anything, but the way they work is you usually sign up for user escrow. You should sign up for escrow because it's how you should do things. But what you do is you'll send your Bitcoin or cryptocurrency you want to convert to the escrow agent, and they will confirm that once the money has gone from one person to the next, it goes to the system of the seller. And there's a big reason as to why they want to do it truthfully, and there's verification, there's like you mine when it's done, the process correctly passed, all this fancy stuff. But I think the system similar has to happen that, for instance, if me and Randy want to confirm Jay's identity, I can ask Jay, does me and Randy trust Jay enough to tell me that that's the Randy I'm looking for? And if that's the case, that's awesome. And like, so for instance, like when we try, like my grandparents tried to get a loan pass recently, and I think the bank wanted to amend it was fraudulent because they put my mom's phone number down. And I guess there was something you could do where it was like they checked you probably know it's from Jay, but I was told they could like look up your name, associate phone number somehow, and it wasn't theirs, so they worked that wrong. So like if you can confirm people's phone numbers, that's a good way to do it, and just having enough levels to that, that's much more beneficial. But I think it's more like you get to choose like which one to be and Randy can agree is a good enough method or a good third party. That's committed to do. It's more going to be like a distributed system that's like just fully decentralized.
I think if you don't have it centralized, also you introduce the option of having multiple identities, whereas if you have a centralized one, you can have different aspects of your identity for different things versus creating multiple different identities.
We have that right now though. Like your state, like you can register your like you can state ID, you can your national ID, you can change your name at the state level. We have kind of some different aspects to the situation.
So I have one question. So yeah, we talk about, we have, different, multiple identity in real world, in our world. So we're talking about the decentralized identity. It means we use this identity in a decentralized, the web. So the point is, what do we use it for? What's the use case? I say we cannot avoid that. Now we are sitting around here, we talk about something, we know who is who, we know the face, whatever. But maybe in the web, we all, the member of the same web. We don't know who you are. We don't know you are there.
Well,
right? Well, whether
so,
I agree with you or not.
Jade's a robot.
Jay is a
It's a
robot.
hologram.
Yeah.
And he's getting rusty. So I think maybe this is what you're talking about, and we're gonna cut this off. because we're past an hour, but you're bringing up an excellent point, which touches upon generally decentralized identity pegs to one end of the spectrum, which is definitive identity, meaning I want to know absolutely that this is Jay.
This body is Jay.
This body is Jay, or who I'm interacting with is Jay. Another key part that's missing that isn't talked about is, can we get close to almost complete anonymity? Because I think we have to work in both ends of the spectrum. I think we want to interact with others in a near, if not totally anonymous fashion.
See, I don't think you have to have a different identity to do that. You can have different aspects of your own identity that may communicate not personal information, but transaction information or whatever.
Yeah, well, you're talking about zero knowledge proofs, but even with zero knowledge proofs, which, I think have a big, trust and adoption hurdle around them because they're so complicated. But I think there's still like real-time live interactions that it would be good to have the ability to engage in those interactions in an anonymous mode. So,
Yeah, this.
To somebody, but maybe not to somebody else.
Maybe. Anyway, we're gonna conclude this. I think this has been a great conversation. Thanks. It's given me some additional material to add to the presentation, and the presentation that I showed was just a draft, basically. But I'm gonna cut it off at this point. Tom, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned. We will definitely be readdressing this as we move forward. All right. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me, Jay Carpenter, all spelled out, at desertblockchain.com. Have a good day.